The gospel text of today, taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 to 36, is made up of three parts. In the first part, Jesus comes to the disciples in the darkest part of the night, walking on the water and assuring them. In the second part, Peter tries to emulate Jesus by attempting to walk on the water himself, but he begins to sink. And in the third part, people show their faith by their willingness to touch even the fringe of his garment. And so in the first part of the gospel text of today, we are told that the disciples go on their own for the first time in Matthew's gospel. It is also the first time in Matthew's gospel that Jesus is shown as praying. The scene is immediately after Jesus has fed 5,000 with a mere 5 loaves and 2 fish. It is very likely that Jesus went up on the mountain to pray, to thank God, because God was with him, because God came to his aid when he needed God's aid. And more importantly, Jesus knew that God would come to his aid. Jesus had faith that God would come to his aid. Even as the disciples are on their own, they are struggling. They cannot make headway. They are expert fishermen. They would have been on the sea numerous times. They would have encountered rough waves numerous times, and yet they cannot make any progress at all without Jesus. Matthew tells us the boat was battered by the waves, and the disciples are in the boat. Even as they are in the boat and battered, the Lord comes to them walking on the water. Walking on the water was a quality which only God possessed. God alone walks on the water. So by walking on the water, Jesus is showing that he is indeed Son of God, which is the last phrase in the reading of today when the disciples recognize him and say, truly, you are Son of God. When Jesus comes to the disciples, he reveals himself to them as I am. The Greek words are ego eimi. These are the words which God used when Moses asked him what name he must give the people who would ask him who had sent him. God says then, ego eimi, I am. And the same words are used by Jesus when he comes to the aid of the disciples. But he tells them something more when he says, tharsai, which means take heart or be courageous. I am ego eimi meiun phobieste. Do not be afraid. Fear is the opposite of faith. When I ask for something and when I doubt or whether I am frightened, I will not get what I am asking for, it means the opposite of having faith. And so in the second part of the gospel text of today, Peter is not very sure that it is the Lord, because his question to the Lord is, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus uses one word, come. And by using this one word, Jesus is telling Peter, before you step into the water, you must have faith. You cannot doubt. You cannot be double-minded. You cannot say, yes, I will walk on the water, and yes, I might sink. No, you have to be confident that when it is I, you will walk on the water. Peter begins the walk. But even as he begins the walk, what he does is he notices the strong wind. In other words, he removes his gaze from the Lord. If he had looked at the Lord, if he had focused on the Lord, if he had concentrated on the Lord, he would not have noticed the strong wind. But because he removes his gaze from the Lord, he notices the strong wind, and that makes him frightened. And so he begins to sink. His gaze is now diverted from the Lord. His gaze is removed from the Lord, which is why he begins to sink. And Jesus, as he always does with us, reaches out his hand and caught him and says to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Each one of us is going through our own battering by the waves of life. And even as we are in the boat which is being battered by the waves, Jesus comes to us walking on the water in the darkest part of our turmoil, in the darkest part of our anguish, in the darkest part of our challenges. The Lord comes to us walking on the water and says to us, "Tharsaite, take heart, ego emi, I am, meiun phobieste, do not be afraid." If we have faith, even as little as a grain of mustard seed, we will indeed be able, like the Lord, to walk on the water if it is the Lord's will. And so our prayer must be, "Lord, if it is your will, I will overcome this challenge. I will overcome this problem. I will overcome this difficulty. And if it is not, I know you will give me the courage and the strength to face it squarely." In the third part, the numerous people who know that Jesus has faith, who know that Jesus is indeed a representative of God, go to him from all parts of Gennesaret and want only to touch the fringe of his garment. This action of theirs of touching even the fringe of his garment is an indication of the faith they possess. And so today, faith is at the center of the readings. It was faith which helped Jesus to feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. It was faith which helped him to walk on the water and to come to the aid of the disciples. It was the faith of the people in Jesus that helped them to be healed. But it was lack of faith, and more importantly, doubt on the part of Peter, which led him to start sinking. And so we need to ask ourselves whether we are going to be faithful or whether we are going to be faithless and doubt the Lord, who can command even the waves of the sea. Let us ask ourselves whether, like the disciples, we will be able to respond to the Lord's coming to our aid with these words, "Truly, you are the Son of God."